Hi, Prof.
Okay, you in
Yeah,
already?
so again, my computer is kind of slow. So sometimes if I disappear, it'll be left with you
Oh,
to carry on the torch.
yeah.
Okay. So today our discussion is division, belonging, and the Liberian election, a textual framework. And well, thank you guys for joining us. As always, we have our favorite people here, and I hope you can. Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to say share the show, please, because it's very difficult for people to find the show. So please share the show. Share it to your friends. Share it to the groups. So we will wait a few minutes while you share the show. And Prof was the one who decided that we should speak on this topic, and it
Mhm.
was born out of the concern of the toxic environment in which we find ourselves with regards to the upcoming election in our country, and the divisiveness that is coming about because of different elements of division that's coming up in our nation and on social media. So, Prof, you want to give us a little intro before we start?
Mhm. Okay, we today's topic reminds me of some of the tension that uh, was around in the war years, especially when ECOMOG was on the ground and it went to the era of the interim government of national unity. With the relative peace that was in the country, people, especially many in the media world, uh, implicitly will often forget that we were still at war. The stories that they filed and all that, sometimes some of the stories talked about uh, areas where the Taylor photos were landing, their shots, bombs, and all that kind of a thing. And in the context of security, that was a no-go zone. And so ECOMOG often complained about that, and we, especially I was with the Ministry of Information, we would beg people, and they, for whatever reason, they would think that sensational reportage was the best way to go because the paper could be bought and all that kind of a thing. This element of things are not as good as they seem, that people have to be very careful what they are doing, I think reflects what is happening today in Liberia because of the relative peace that is in the country. Politicians are jumping down the throat of one another. People are being bombastic in their uh, language and all that. And what I hope we get out of today's session is that the peace that we say we have over there is no peace. And it's going to take a long time, and it's going to depend on sober minds to make sure that the country does not implode. From this vantage point, when we talk, it's like uh, I think you are trying to overstretch things and what have you. For some of us who have lived the agony of war, some of us who have lived the agony of hunger, death, and destruction are sensitive, and justifiably so, that people have to be very careful. So it is very much important for us to talk about the facets of division, the importance of understanding belonging within the context of identity, within the context of, you will say, character education and all that kind of a thing, to make sure that people are understanding these things so that the pending national elections will be held in a more sober way. No one is saying that you should not uh, identify with a party or what have you, but you ought to do it in a very civil way so that in the end, we all have a place to go. We all have a place to go. If you do your infight and the infight leads to devastating things, the very country you're talking about, you will not enjoy it. So these are the things I hope that we will continue to beat on the ears of especially state actors so that instead of carrying a sense of invincibility, nothing can happen to me or nothing will happen or what have you, people will be sober enough to conduct themselves in a very wholesome way.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think that we have been sounding the alarm over years now. I
Yeah,
think that when we started, one of the instruments that we tried to use for I guess some semblance of unity
yeah,
was, what is Liberia to you,
yes,
or what is Liberia to me?
yeah,
We had said that if you start to think about what the country means to you,
yeah,
and delve deep into yourself,
yeah,
we ask for essays, you might find what Liberia means to you.
yeah,
And in so doing, you would bond with the country or renew the bond
yeah,
that you thought was gone. So we did that. And then we talk about what it means to be a Liberian. And then people kind of like, oh, I'm a Liberian. We say, but what does it mean?
yeah,
If you say I'm a Liberian, what does it mean to be a Liberian? And I think that the literary hour, more than most, is the place where you come to really question,
yeah,
reflect, on things. Sure, we do literature, but that's the aim of art, to make you think and question. You know, so what I see taking place now through social media is this build up of division. And people might laugh at it, but it's building. It's building, and Romeo Dallaire from the Shake Hands with the Devil, he said, seismic changes can happen in an instant, but there's a build up also that comes. People say, where is it coming from? It's coming from those little things that you laughed at, those little things that you think were so inconsequential. That's
mhm.
where it's coming from. So I think that we really need to pay attention to what's happening in the country now.
Even Beckerman, as the quiet before.
Yes,
The
yes,
quiet before. Whatever happens may be positive, whatever happens may be negative. But Beckerman is focusing on the little things that build up to that particular movement. The little things
yes,
the little things that build up to. We saw Arab Spring, for instance. You know, we saw what happened in Rwanda.
Yes, yes,
Even in the 1930s and the 1940s, we saw what occurred in Germany. You know,
yes,
little gossip here and there, little whispers and what have you. By the time you know what is happening, one single group was, targeted. One single group. So um, it is very much important. We who call ourselves social commentators, we who call ourselves the intelligentsia, uh, we who see the purpose of unity, collectivism, as very important to progress, must never be weary. Social media, you get on and you are talking, and you have a particular audience clapping for you and what have you. That is not enough, especially if that is geared towards inciting people. Inciting people is a dangerous thing, especially like you were talking about social media. Somebody gets in the corner and writes something because that person can easily use a what? A false name or pen name and what have you. He or she feels okay to get away with it, and it is not healthy.
it's interesting that you bring up Rwanda because the genocide didn't just happen.
No.
The thing is, I mean, for people who don't know the background, when the Belgians took over,
Yeah.
what they did to bring about division or to bring about division first, they made the Tutsi and the Hutu carry identification cards.
Yes.
So you had to know, okay, this person is a Tutsi and this person is a Hutu. But then they use that, what is that thing called? We used to use vernier caliper
Yes.
to measure the size of the noses.
Yeah.
If you had a long nose, using that theory of the elongated African theory, if you had a long nose, then you were somehow better. The shape of your eyes, how tall you were,
Yeah.
so then you were classified as a Tutsi.
Yeah.
So by giving them these different instruments of division, I would say, or characteristics of division, so by the time the Belgians left, you didn't need anything else. It was institutionalized. The Tutsi were somehow given advantages that the Hutus were not given.
Yes.
So, of course, now you had this class system of the Tutsis being the elites and
Yes.
the being the plebeians, as we call it, or the serfs. And then the danger fester. It festers. So by the time the genocide came, and then you had at the time, thank God, almost there wasn't Facebook and all of these things, but there was a radio, the RTLM, and they played constantly. They play anti-Tutsi conspiracy
Yeah.
theories, anti-Tutsi. So the people, because in order for you to demonize somebody, I mean to hurt somebody, you got to demonize them, make them the other.
Yeah.
So the Tutsi were called cockroaches.
Mm-hmm. The
And the Hutus were told to exterminate the cockroaches. So of course, then they were dehumanized. Just how during slavery, when they said, "Oh, slaves don't feel pain,"
yeah.
you dehumanize the person. So that's what happened. You measure their noses. You say, "Okay, this person is a Tutsi." You measure the shape of their eyes, how tall they were. So they're Tutsis, and you give them advantages that you didn't give the other. So of course, then when you leave, the division is already there.
You have implanted it, and it has grown like an ingrown
Yes,
toenail. Yeah.
Yes, and they're doing that also in Myanmar with the Rohingya
Yeah,
genocide.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
That's right. That other
yeah,
ugly, that other ugly thing
you know,
there. You see.
and we're
So
seeing that
yeah,
we're seeing constantly, all of these divisions coming one of the quotes that I like, and I wrote it down from Romeo Dallaire, because his book "Shake Hands with the Devil," that's about the Rwandan genocide.
yeah,
He says,
mhm,
"I know there is a God because in Rwanda I shook hands with the devil.
mm,
I have seen him, I have smelled him, and I have touched him. I know the devil exists."
mm,
You see, so you had people, neighbors, killing neighbors because they were considered of a different group.
yeah,
So it's like sounding the alarm for Liberia to say we need to take care of our national unity,
yeah. We have to be
and
very
see
careful.
ourselves as one. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
have to
have
be
to be
very
very
careful.
careful. You see, the thing about it is that you know a nation is generally comprised of one group, but a nation state is a swell tide of ethnic groups.
Yes,
So, talking about a nation state, we are talking about diversity. We are talking about plural ethnics. One ethnic group cannot uh, survive outside of the framework of a nation state. So, it is very much important for people of these diverse ethnic groups to understand that it is only by working together that we can take care of the health needs, we can care of food security, we can take care of education and all other things that go along. So unless we are prepared to work in honesty, we are prepared to work in sincerity, we are prepared to focus on integrity, we are doing harm not only to ourselves but to the other people. It doesn't worth it. It doesn't worth it. We have to continue to be futuristic in our behaviors, in our attitudes, and what have you. Yes, uh, we may talk a bit about individual ethnicities, but the idea, as I said earlier, that one ethnic group cannot sustain itself outside of the plurality of ethnicities requires us to be very careful in what we do. Uh, that brings in the part education can play. Uh, I think one or two times we said it in this case here. The, the days of the universities, either the University of Liberia or Covington, uh, nothing can so easily surpass the spirit of unity that that existed on those campuses. During my days in the mid to late 1970s, it was a marvelous thing for people from the north, people from the south, people from the east to work together to discuss things in the interest of the nation and not in the interest of some ethnic group and what have you. Talk about Studa, talk about Singh, talk about soup. Really, Loma, Crew, Grable, all these people, these young people working together for the upliftment of the ordinary people, and in essence, the upliftment of the parents, the economic problems. Those were the things that people were talking about. And sadly, some of these people got out of school, and what became their preoccupation was uh, how much food I can put in my bowl to the to the what to the disregarding of other people, and this has to stop.
Prof, I was reading a piece on BBC and they said that the challenge, I'm quoting now, the challenge to democracy in Africa is not the prevalence of ethnic diversity, but the use of identity politics to promote narrow-minded tribal
Yeah,
interests. So people forget, when they do, people forget that Europe, it is seven distinct ethnic identities in Europe.
yeah,
87.
yeah,
You
or
know,
more.
people
Yes,
forget
or
that.
more. Yes,
People forget that ethnicity is not just the domain of Africa.
yeah.
It is how you
That's a
manage.
very good point. Yes.
I think that in Liberia, as in most African countries, the state has failed the people.
Mm.
So what the people they've done now is to look towards their ethnicity,
Mhm.
to say, okay, I mean, I'm part of the state, or I'm part of the nation, so the nation is not doing for me what my tribe can
Mhm.
do for me.
Mhm.
I belong more to my tribe.
Mhm.
The challenge comes when the tribe supersedes the
Yeah.
interest of the state.
Mhm.
So what can the country do to foster that national unity?
Yeah. The point you made regarding ethnicities being also in Europe is very much important. Uh,
Yeah.
and coming and of course, even uh, in the very Europe now with the Serbs and all those fighting, you go to Great Britain and you see Ireland and all those people climbing down each other's throat and what have you. These are developments that come and go. But the question of what people should do, uh, there has to be guardrails put into place. There has to be guardrails put into place. And this is where institutions of integrity, institutions calling for equanimity of mind and spirit will have to come in so that every time there will be a reminder, you know, let us not leave things to chance. You have the interfaith, you have media organizations, you have other civic organizations. They must not see this thing as a play. They must not be complacent. They must not sit in the corner. If there are going to be seminars, if there are going to be conferences, if reports have to be aired, if commentaries on what is going amok, if commentary is made on those things to keep pounding in the heads of state and community actors, then that it has to be. Short of the long is that we must not keep silent. we must not keep silent. Some time ago, I pointed out that um, a nation is a human being. In fact, a plethora of human beings who are in a boat. They are not in multiplicity of boats. They are in the same boat. And therefore, what one individual does, thinking that he or she is just trying to draw individual benefit, that is not enough. People have got to understand that if one person is behaving in a detrimental way, that person eventually may likely bring down the whole nation, bring down the whole country. So people have got to be very careful what they're doing. And the watchword is that a continual type of reminder has to be in the offing.
And I want to read something about Julius Nyerere, who
Yeah,
actually forged national unity in
yeah,
Tanzania. And this
mm,
piece is from the Washington Post, and I'm quoting now. Tanzanians say ethnic harmony is the enduring legacy of Julius Nyerere.
mm,
He was Tanzania's leader for 24 years before he resigned. So he resigned. He didn't die in office. He resigned.
yes, mm-hmm,
He established policies aimed specifically at tamping down ethnic differences. He
yeah,
believed that Tanzania would one day be part of a continent in which
mm,
national identities
mm,
superseded tribal loyalties.
yeah,
Nyerere also had a political purpose. As a member of one of Tanzania's smallest tribes, he
mm,
believed that the best way to prevent marginalization of
mm,
smaller ethnic groups would be to promote national unity.
yeah,
So he stripped political power from tribal chiefs.
yeah,
He forbid,
yeah,
he forbid civil
yeah,
servants from
mm,
working in their hometown and villages,
yeah,
forcing them into areas dominated by other ethnic
mm,
groups
mm,
other than their own.
mm,
He
mm,
sprinkled his cabinet with
mm,
government ministers from
mm,
an array of ethnic groups.
mm,
He made sure that government positions went to both Christians and Muslims.
yeah,
Around Dar es Salaam, which means haven of peace, that's what it
mm,
means. Tanzania Tanzanians of different tribes frequently own businesses together.
yeah,
They formed political alliances. They share
mm,
neighborhoods. They
mm,
lend each other money and
mm.
they intermarry. End of quote.
Yes.
You know,
I, for me, oh, you want it? Okay, any well, complete your thought.
so, and one of the other things that he did, my computer is slow again, but one of the other
Mm,
things that he did was that so if he comes to a village and they want like a water pump,
mm, mm,
he forced them to live together. So he would take some of them and put them to another village, build a faucet, a hand pump there, and then
mm,
bring the other parts of the other village there. So people were,
mm,
so it takes a leader
mm,
also to
mm.
implement policies to be able to say national unity should be
Mm.
paramount,
Yeah.
you know? And
They,
they very did that.
mhm. I really have a problem with some of his things over there. For instance, I liked what he did with professional dispersion, dispersion of the nationals. In other words, instead of going so wholly and solely to work in your country of origin, you know, it will be some kind of rotational type of thing that is good. I like that. But there's something about some of us have been on both sides of the divide in terms of talking about Western oriented and African oriented. So the idea you can create what you can create a number of incentives, but to deny people their natural or cultural identities is not a good thing. After some time, it might backfire. So there needs to be an encouragement, like I said. And then he talked about language, for instance. There has to be a lingua franca. Liberian English, you will find out that even somebody who never went to school self, there is a level of Liberian English that person can speak. So encouraging a lingua franca that everyone can respond to. For instance, in the case of Tanzania, we talk about Swahili. But then in emphasizing Swahili more than any other thing, there was what there was a disadvantage. Many of those people were not encouraged to learn English and all that. Therefore, they were short on that, and it had a backlash when, in fact, the Indian immigrants who went over there, having absorbed English and were using English, try as much as possible to overshadow the people. What I'm saying is that there has to be a balance. That balance, I agree, has to go towards first national unity. So we talk about Liberia as the key uh, point we have to talk about. Under Liberia, we have what? We have ethnicity, we have the family, and we have the individual. If there is a way to make sure that these things are still respected and yet paramount of all is Liberia, I am for it. In the end, you see, in the case of Tanzania, for instance, you found out that many of the Tanzanians were disenfranchised by virtue of not being able to respond to a worldview that was more global than any other thing. So, in a sense, there has to be people, there has to be a group of people studying the best practices that will sustain the unity of the country, as opposed to just looking at one side and then in the end, uh, you know, placing those that may not respond to what we want to do in some sort of limbo. Somebody will talk about unification policy in Liberia, for instance. The unification policy, as I see it, uh, was not. Um, there were no intensive strategies and policies created to kind of serve as the scaffold of the unification policy. So there was a lot more lip service played, especially from the top. I know others will have their own, but I think there was lip service placed uh, at the top, and they didn't water down to the ordinary people. You went in there and just somebody who piazzava dresses and dance all around, and that was yeah, yeah, yeah. They are part of the inclusiveness and what have you. When when it came to economics, when it came to political offices and what have you, were kept at the top. So those things, there has to be some intensity about it. There has to be sincerity and honesty about it. Otherwise, it will fail. That is why, before I turn the mic over to you, that is why I hope that the governance, the what they call the Council of, is it Commission on Governance? There's the Sawyer thing. Yes, I know they were working on the scientificness of governance and what have you, but the practical aspects, I don't know how much they've dealt with that. If that were true and what have you, the silly statement that Prince Johnson made the other day, talking about uh, the Southeast virtually have the whole government and what have you. How can somebody be simplistic like that to say things like that? I would think that the Commission on Governors will be one of those making a serious statement about it, talking about the 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 distribution of civil servants, talking about the distribution of high offices in that place there, to know which ethnic group or something like that has more, or which region of the place that has more, things like that. And even though I wrote about it, I think it's a serious matter and nobody should trivialize it. That there has to be a compendium. There has to be a compendium. There has to be a record to demonstrate who all are You may not call their names and what are you, but how many people from each of the regions uh, are into their government? Some of these people have been brought over from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf days, and even earlier than that. People have to pay attention to what they are doing and saying so that the country does not run amok.
Prof, I'll have to go back out and come back in. I think I have
Okay.
a feedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So
Dennis
yes,
can join you.
yes. So as we were saying, our audience in TV land, uh, unless we fight hard to keep together, being in a country is not an easy thing. And when a problem comes about and we want to address it in an easy way by saying this group is responsible and that other group is responsible, it doesn't help anybody. At the point one is speaking, that individual may think that is a good thing to say, but whether food is not in the country, money is not in the country, hard time is in the country, to say that it is this group that is holding on. That is why hard time is in the country. If you heard about a time in the 1930s and the 1940s when Germans fell on hard time and Adolf Hitler and his minions said that Jews were responsible, that was a serious thing those people did. And so Adolf Hitler was pumping people to go and kill as many Jews as they could find. The same thing, and this time it was in Africa, Rwanda. Rwanda. You people, some of you heard about the massive killing that was done of Hutus by Tutsis. It is not a healthy thing to see a national problem as the problem created by just one sector of the population. National problems often have so many layers. So you cannot pick up that one layer and run with it. And by the time you know what is happening, much damage has been done. What we are saying, if you have been following up as we are talking, is that Liberia is not at peace as yet. The remnants of the conflict continue to be around. If we want to make a difference, we have to do hard thinking to know that when there is a national problem, there are multiple reasons for that national problem. Refusing to find a good place of analysis, a good situation of analysis to deal with those things have the propensity to destroy uh, many other things in the country.
So the
Just
prof is recording. Can you hear me now?
yes, I can hear you.
Do I have feedback or no?
No, at least I'm not picking that up. You did well.
Okay. 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 Prof. Um, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. When we were discussing before, and the
Mhm.
audience will let me know if I have feedback.
Yeah.
When we're discussing before, that's what we said. That it's not. People say, oh, people are talking about, oh, this person, they cannot speak the mother tongue, or
Yeah.
this person, they don't belong here.
Mhm.
These elements of belonging that we talk
Mhm.
about,
Mhm.
it's like when we said that, like Kenneth Kaunda, remember when he was running for president, they
Yes,
said that he was not from Zambia, he was from Malawi.
yeah,
And Kenneth Kaunda said, I will let the people of Zambia decide.
yeah.
So the question we've been asking on this journey on Focus on Liberia is, who are we? as a people, and we're still wrestling with that question. Does it mean that if you to be a Liberian, you must be able to speak one of the languages there? Does
The
it
thing,
mean
okay, go
does
ahead.
it mean that you must have been born there?
Mhm.
What does it mean? Because
Okay.
before, it used to mean that if your mother if she, were a Liberian but your father wasn't, you were not a Liberian.
Mm.
Remember, citizenship before came through the father.
Yes.
So then people wrestled with that and said, no, as Liberians, it should be whether your mother is Liberian, your father is Liberian, you should be Liberian. So there was a consensus.
Mhm.
Liberians said, we want our people
Mhm.
who born our children to be
Mhm.
Liberian. Our children should
Yeah.
be Liberian. Okay, that
Yeah.
was a consensus. So this national dialogue that I think we're always talking about,
Mhm.
this is not peculiar to Liberia.
Yeah.
When we said, what does Liberia mean to you? Ghana already had that.
Mhm.
Ghana had a discussion on that.
Yeah.
When South Africa had the anti-apartheid when it was ending, they said, what do we want to be?
Yeah.
That's why when you go to South Africa, they said all of the languages, they are natural resources. So you go to the Constitutional Court, they got it in Zulu, they got it in Tonga, they got it in Xhosa,
Mhm.
they got it in Vindi, everything. Because they said, you know what? We want all the languages to be our resources.
Mhm.
So, what is it that Liberia wants? Who is a Liberian? What does
The-
that mean? And probably the
mhm.
danger is if we don't have these discussions,
Mhm.
every time we come on social media,
Mhm.
and you and I can be on social media and I'm listening to foolishness, I will turn it off,
Mhm.
but there may be other people who will not turn it off and who
Mhm.
will be influenced,
Mhm.
just how in Rwanda they were influenced by the measuring of the noses, the
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
at the eyes and how tall you were and the ID
Mhm.
card. That
Mhm.
could happen in Liberia. And that's what
Yeah.
we're saying, that as election is coming,
Yeah.
we should not fall into this tribal identity politics to
Mhm.
be able to divide our country even more. We should not.
Mhm. Yeah. The thing about it is, one of the things that's peculiar about Liberia is that Liberia has evolved out of two major worldviews: the African worldview and the Western worldview. I don't care how much we try to dismantle that, that is the reality. We have a binary evolution. So to say that you have to speak an indigenous language before you can be regarded as a Liberian, that is wrong ab initio. From the very beginning is wrong. You know, the indigenous people all by themselves, they didn't evolve Liberia. They didn't evolve Liberia. When they arrived in the Green Coast area, they were in their cultural nations, as I often call it, cultural nations. They were in their silos. They were in Crew silo, Pele silo, Mandingo silo, and what have you. It is the group, the Western flavor Africans, I always call them, the Western flavored Africans, who came with a singular sense of political identity. And it was through them that what is called a nation state began to evolve. So we participate in our Africanness, we participate in our Westernness. Nobody can cut down from us. And to say that because I cannot speak an indigenous language, I am not a Liberian, it is problematic. It's a sad understanding of what the nation state uh, 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 nomenclature is all about. So for me, I will not even buy into that. And we can always emphasize that something we are doing now, and we should never so easily, as I said, get weary. If you can speak an indigenous language plus English, that is good for you. If you cannot, it's probably unfortunate, but there are people who, even though they cannot speak the indigenous language, they are invested in understanding the proverbs, the parables, the myth construct, and all those things. And that is also a plus. If they take interest in all things indigenous, that is an important thing. But we cannot use that as a, a particular way of disenfranchising the individual's Liberianness, the individual's Africanness. So these things, there are people who don't understand them. Maybe you can't blame them, but we who understand them have got to keep. I have children. I have children with all the indigenous language. I am proud of to say they cannot speak what they cannot speak them because they when we were growing up and then before they walk in, they were always intermingling with other friends who were not of the Kru ethnic group, and so English became their lingua franca. English was a way of unify people here and there. So short of it long is that, Jackie, we have to simply educate people. Another thing, as soon as they talk about indigenous group, they don't talk about dialect. No, all these things are languages, but each language has multiple dialects. So you will have what? You will have Kru language, and in the Kru language, you have Southern Kru, you have Granses Kru, you have what? You have Buto Kru. You come to Kwele, you have Joklo Kwele, and several other aspects of Kwele. You come to Bassa, the same thing. You have Bassa language, you have what dialects of the Bassa language. So all those things take time. They must be understood. The more we understand them, we know how to handle them and then push forward.
You know, Prof, we're not saying that to belong. So you know, let me give this quote. I'm quoting. Some people seem to think tribalism is an unmitigated evil, but it is not. Every ethnic group has its own cultural features and may therefore have something of value to contribute to the way of life of the country or region of which it forms a part. End of quote. So it is not that oh, you know, Kru is bad or Grebo is bad. You know, they're distinct fish. What it is that elements of these groups must strengthen the body politic of Liberia. It must be Liberia.
No, that's
yeah. So Francis Deng, who was the first special representative of the human rights of internally displaced person, he said there are 4 policy options. I'm quoting. There are 4 policy options for managing pluralistic societies. Well, one is to create a national framework with which all can identify without distinction, right?
Yes.
Post-colonial Africa stands poised between rediscovering its roots, its indigenous values, institutions, and experiences, and pursuing what? Pursuing modernity.
Yeah.
So it is that crossroads that Liberia finds itself. Yeah. You know, so the thing is, if you know, I always say to people that every country is peculiar. People say Liberia has a very peculiar history, which is true. But don't forget, China was colonized by Japan.
Yeah.
Small island Japan colonized China, and there were atrocities they did there. You know, they comfort women. They took women and made them into prostitutes and supplied them to the soldiers. You know, made the Chinese women prostitutes. And at one point, and at one point they apologized to China. Now, what I'm saying is that China now closed themselves up, built their country through agriculture and national unity because they decided we want to be a power in the world. So my question, my thing is, we need a national dialogue, a dialogue and a frank discussion. And I always use that word frank, because we need to have that discussion to say, this is what happened. Should we move on? Can we move on? Can we move on? Or should we be stuck in the past? We need to have that discussion, and that's what I'm talking about. That when will we have that discussion? That's what I'm talking about.
It's an important emphasis. I believe there was one key moment that we had what came of as a semblance of the dialogue we're talking about. And it came about when the 1986 Constitution was being written. And the preamble, I wish we had a copy of the 1986 Constitution. The preamble captured the essence of what we are talking about, that the new dispensation coming after the coup era was driven by the multiple experiences Liberians had, which made it necessary for all sectors of Liberia to cultivate the sense of mutual respect that will drive the fashioning of policies, that will keep public policy initiatives at the top of whatever government did. I see that, of course, with this strong dispensation of democracy is strong because even though people had talked about it, it wasn't as strong as it is now with the multi-party politics that we share. So yes, there is a need for that. And there should be an annual exhibition, an annual set of activities where a lot of these things we are talking about, people will have movies to show, people will have books to discuss, people will have festive displays of the multiplicity of subcultures and what have you. So all I'm saying is that the preamble. I see a document on the screen.
Oh, no, there's no preamble.
Oh, what's the document? It was a beautiful thing. But anyway, what I'm saying is that it is not a.
I don't know. Is that Dennis putting something on his screen?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I don't know.
Is it possible for? Can we increase the font size? That would be a good thing.
Of the Republic of Liberia, acknowledging our devout gratitude to God for our existence as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and relying on His divine guidance for our survival as a nation. It's gone. No, I don't know if he moved it.
Is it still there? Okay, let's see something.
As a nation, realizing from many experiences during the course of our national existence, which culminated in the revolution of April 12, 1980, when our
Yes.
Constitution of July 26, 1847 was suspended, that of
Yes.
all of our people, irrespective of history, tradition, creed, or ethnic background, are of one common body politic.
Great.
Yeah, it says it there.
Yes, it says it there. Yes, thank you, Dennis. Yes.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that the point you are making, I don't want to see it being a one-shot deal. It's just like people, they have a special day for what? African Day. You remember that one? Where people
Yeah.
wear African clothes, and that's the end of it. But it's got to be a continuous type of thing, something that will bring us into the consciousness of our oneness, and yet like a finger, like a hand with multiple fingers, we are a nation state. We may have subcultures and what have you, but we must place our first allegiance to the Republic of Liberia in a genuine contest. We have to be honest about it. We have to be sincere about it. We have to find ways of motivating people to subscribe to such feeling as it relates to keeping the nation together.
You see, Prof, I what I feel, frankly, is that
Yeah.
we're in this waiting place. You know, we're in this waiting place where we can, like as my grandmother used to say, you can't G no ho. You know, you can't go nor come. You just there, oh, let's do this, let's do this. But there is no concrete road. There are a lot of things in that book, Shake Hands with the Devil, you know, the book about Rwandan genocide, that I want to read, you know. So there's something that I highlighted. And I'm quoting Romeo Dallaire from his book. He says, many signs point to the fact that the youth of the third world, we don't use that word anymore, we say the global south, but the youth of the third world will no longer tolerate living in circumstances that give them no hope for the future. From the young boys I met in a demobilization camps in Sierra Leone, to the suicide bombers of Palestine and Chechnya, to the young terrorists who fly planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, we can no longer afford to ignore them. We have to take concrete steps to remove the causes of their rage, or we will suffer the consequences, right? Then he goes on to say, the global village is deteriorating at a rapid pace. And in the children of the world, the result is rage. It is the rage I saw in the eyes of the teenagers in the Hamwe militiamen in Rwanda. It is the rage in the hearts of the children of Sierra Leone. It is the rage I felt in the crowds of ordinary civilians in Rwanda. It is the rage that resulted in September 11. Human beings who have no rights to security, no future, no hope, and no means to survive are a desperate group who will do desperate things to take what they believe they need and deserve. End of quote. And the reason I think that's very important is because we keep saying, oh, Arab Spring. Arab Spring, those people, yes, they were unemployed, but they were better educated and they were older. Those people were like 24, college graduates, couldn't find job. You're talking about a young population, this youthful bulge in Africa right now, under 25, who have never worked, who have no future, and they are the ones that Kofi Annan said the most dangerous person in the world is a young man who cannot feed his family. Because if he comes home every day and his baby is hungry and his wife is saying, what you brought for us? One day there will be nothing he will not do to feed his family.
Papa
And he coming home with empty pockets. So the reason that we're sounding the alarm is that, Prof, this is a tinderbox of a young person who's hungry, and you're telling them, oh, the reason why you're hungry, they pay man, take your job. They grab man. That is a match. So the country now must not be so divisive. these people on the social media who are lighting the match, most of them have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Most of them are either outside the country,
Yeah.
most of them have jobs, they are working. So now it is time now for the countries to say, what is it that we want for Liberia?
Yeah.
The South African constitution came out of the ANC charter. This is the country that we want. Do we have such a thing? Dennis put up the preamble. Okay, should we craft a new one? Now, one of the persons who is always here is Sam Wallow. And Sam says a national dialogue require an honest discussion about the past
Yeah.
so that past wrongs are effectively acknowledged and accepted as truth and appropriately addressed so that the people of Liberia see themselves as one and walk into the future together side by side. It cannot be a be bygone sideshow.
Yeah.
And, and,
Now,
and, and Sam and I have discussed this as well. And I agree with him in some instances. We talk about the Monserrato purchase, as we call it. We talk about other things. My question is, when he says for us to have an honest discussion about the past so that the wrongs are effectively acknowledged, what happens if these wrongs are not acknowledged? Do we not walk into the future?
okay, they
Because
talking
because
about
it seems as if we keep saying,
the the
no, we keep
you
saying, Prof. I think
no, go ahead. You're making you landed.
no. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, okay. Remember,
Yes.
I said something about the evolution of the 1986 Constitution. We will not return to the circumstances of conflicts we find ourselves in until the TRC. If you, I don't know how many parts of the TRC report that you've looked at. The TRC report is an in-depth report that brought out a number of the things that we are talking about today, things that remain divisive and all that. I'm saying that we have two strong benchmarks of the dialogue we are talking about, where people went up there, the Prince Johnson, the Famula, Tipute, Sawyer, so many of Joe Wale, Chia Chipo, all these people made salient points that eventually culminated in to the document, the report that I was just talking about. So instead of making those as standalones, we have to make sure that so many other activities are created to keep this whole idea of a united front on the front burner, so that eventually something meaningful can come out of the conversations, the dialogues we are holding here. If you want to make it a one-shot deal, there are people who fearing that giving money to stage these things will take money out of their pockets and therefore don't want to participate in it. There has to be so many spaces created for the discussion of so many aspects of what we are talking about.
I think for me, it's the vagueness of this. We have to move forward. We had invited Sam on the show, and I hope he comes one day. I am not saying we should stir up the pot. No, because we can't go back. What I'm saying is, for example, in Kenya, right? They kept talking about how the British tortured the Mau Mau,
Mm.
how the British people, it was like almost like a genocide. They decimated
Yeah.
the Mau Mau, the people, because they felt that they were terrorists in the terrorists at that time. What happened was that some NGOs got together and said, you know what, we can sue Britain for these atrocities, right? And got a lawyer. And interestingly enough, the lawyers were able to find thousands of documents in
Yeah.
Britain, in the
Yeah.
archive. And they
Mhm.
used that. I mean, Britain were castrating people. They were raping women with pepper water in bottles. So these people, so there was a concrete action, right? Now, what is it this dialogue will do? Do we start with, okay, let's start with land? Do we start with this? Where do we start before we say let bygone be bygone? Land is an important issue. I was watching a video about some land dispute, and they were dragging this woman to court. And it brought to mind what we were discussing about the Tottenham Papers. Remember, we had a president, and this is not just Americo Liberian taking land or so and so. We have a president who will write a judge,
Mhm.
and say to the judge, I want you to give that woman 200 acres of land.
Yeah.
So who was being dispossessed
Mhm.
of that land that
Who
you
gave
would
the man the authority to
to take
give
the land?
away them?
Now we cannot go back. We had people from Barbados coming and getting 50 acres of land
Yeah.
and buying some more. We had
Yeah.
people from the United States coming. I mean,
Mhm.
some people would just throw a rock. So you have the
Yeah.
Methodist Church,
Mhm.
right? Because of Joseph Jenkins Roberts,
Yeah.
owning almost thousands of acres, the whole
Yeah.
Greystone.
Yeah.
We cannot go back. Do we acknowledge injustices in the past and say, you know what? It is past. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Or do we say there must be some remuneration?
Mhm.
Some money must change hands?
Mhm.
Or do we say, as my great grandmother used to do in the Grebo tradition, let's spew water,
Yeah.
and we spew the water, everything finished, we move
Yeah.
on with clean
Mhm.
slate? How do we move forward? Is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree that there has to be several facets. There has to be several facets to this, call it reconciliation, call it, getting things normalized and what have you. There are several facets to it. And people will then have to, uh, people will first have to maybe a national conference and decide, yes, this is how we are going to go about it, or build up on the TRC, because there is another conclusion or recommendation from the TRC, which had to do with uh, the village concept of uh, of managing conflict or dissolving conflict and what have you. So these things we can talk about them and then move on. I think Emmanuel is saying the big the the big and unending problem I have in our republic is sycophancy, a kind that play a blind eye when only a few that are closer to the power. Yeah, of course. Emmanuel, we think about it. That's what it is. Sycophancy is one of the things that really keep us from moving ahead. I agree. So coming back to what you were saying, Jackie, I think first this whole thing to dissolve it is multifaceted. Uh, we building on the constitutional aspect, building on the TRC, we have to sometimes even some of the recommendations are there, but the point of emphasizing them is what we cannot do. And there has to be a group of people that will decide that enough is enough, and unless we have a serious conversation about that, things might not go as well as we want them to go.
So I guess the question is, how do we start this discussion?
Mm,
Because now we have an election coming.
mm,
Should we make that one of the, I guess, debate questions? Should we
mm,
make that a priority? Should national unity be on the table?
mm.
And if it's national unity, what does unity mean? I
Mm.
mean, people use that word, and you taught me, Prof, definition of terms.
Yeah, yeah,
What does
definition of
unity
things, yeah.
mean?
Mm, mm.
What does it mean to say, okay, we want unity? Does that mean that I should give up my tribal identity? Does it mean that I can
Mm,
be a part of this body
mm.
politic and still maintain it? Sam Wallace
Well,
said 150 years of inequality can be repaired in one conference. It is
yeah,
likely to be a long process before getting
yeah,
to healing.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so we
No,
agree.
so, but
You
the
know,
thing about giving up your identity is just not natural. It's just not. You remind me of even E.B. Tyler. Tyler happened to be one of the world-renowned anthropologists and sociologists talking about culture. Even the very uh, Edward Woodman Blyden, he speaks to the importance of culture. So you can have your identity and yet know that interdependence is very much important. You celebrating your identity, you need to understand that you have to open a window for national identity to become a very important part.
yeah. One of the other things that we kind of gloss over is Unangwe's sycophancy. I totally agree with him. Prof, we have been, this show has been so long that I told you the other day, I think it was yesterday, they sent me a reminder. You know how Facebook sends this reminder
Yes,
one
yes,
year
all
ago
the
or
time.
2 years
Yeah. Mhm.
ago. But they had this reminder about Animal Farm that
Yes,
it's been a year since we discussed it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's been a year already. But I
yes,
agree with Nangwe. You and I, we discuss when we say, who are you? You are more than, so I say, who is Nangbe? Nangbe is more than a person who comes on a show and
mhm,
listens from Japanese Freeway. There are things, and Nangbe might have a red line to say, these are the things I cannot do.
yeah,
So Nangbe can say, I mean, Nangbe, apologies to you. Nangbe
yeah,
could
yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah,
oh, I could lie, but I could not
yeah,
steal. I
yeah,
can't steal. That's my red line. Most people on these different shows, or these people who jump from one political party to the other, they have
yeah,
no red line, Prof.
yeah,
Their red line is a paycheck.
yeah.
And
It's very basket.
unfortunately, these people are the ones who consider themselves people of integrity that our young people should look up to.
Yeah,
You cannot say there are values in this man that I
mhm,
see and I like,
yeah,
and then the next day you say, oh no, I don't like this man anymore. I like somebody else. No, that
yeah,
can't happen. You have to have integrity of person, of
yeah,
self, and of
yes,
values to say, even if this person loses this election or loses
mhm,
this position,
yeah,
the qualities I see in this person are good qualities.
yeah,
So our people, they are so faithless, and disloyal,
yeah. Many of
that
them. Yeah, mhm,
the sycophancy is, and then they smile at you but don't really, so all of these things, this toxic mix of distorted values,
mhm,
are the things that now we have to say, what is the Liberian characteristic? We always say, oh, Liberians are friendly people. But what else makes up the Liberian
mhm,
characteristic?
mhm.
besides being friendly, what else? You know, that is the thing that I guess we should talk about. Yes, it will take years. I mean, it's not going to be unending. People will
Mhm.
discuss, you know, but there comes a time when it will end, and we would either have to be the better for it. Language says the dialogue must be done in sincerity.
Right.
Partiality and taking on of one side can discourage the dialogue from going forward and having no
Yeah.
interest from the citizens. The
Yeah.
one thing that should not happen is for the president to appoint the people who lead the dialogue.
Yes.
You know, it should be like in South Africa they get civil society
Mhm.
leaders, and then
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
give like
Please
five.
go on talking. Yeah.
You know, they say, yeah, five names. And then out of the five names, maybe they choose three. You know, I always say that, you know, if, for example, even the president of a university um must come in front of civil society and tell us, you know, this is the role of the university. The university is not siloed from the nation. The university plays an active part
Yes.
moving the dialogue. So most of these people who are in strategic places in government positions must face the nation and say, this is what I pledge to do. You know, if I'm elected, true, it's true. I know that sometimes they don't hold themselves to that, but we must hold them to that. And we
Okay.
can only hold them to that if we are a united country. We have to be a united country, Prof. That's the only way we can go forward. You know, and
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, when you look at things that people say and do, it's frustrating. And yet, just imagine what happens in the very America. How many people have not talked about dialogue? How many people have not talked about racial integration and talk about the conversation and what have you? So there has to be a multi-pronged approach. There has to be a multi-pronged approach, uh, and over some time, So that is, I guess, that is the reality. We can throw out the ideal that after a time this has to come to an end. But once in every corner, there is the matter of trying to find I call it the meat and green GRAI and meat and green alliance. This guy used to say, what is his name? Oh man, Kekura Kutu. Kekura Kutu used to say that he normally hangs his cloth where the sun can shine. Yeah, I never hang my cloth anywhere else but the place where my sun can shine. So you find people, sadly, we also work on the thinking as a hobby,
yeah,
and we talk about the three grades of thinkers, and we found out that it is just 1% or 10% of individuals in a society that have a claim to clarity of mind and clarity of thought, have the integrity and what have you. And then we have 10, we have 40% that is interested in just raising questions and not having answers for those questions. The rest of the people are those who are driven by emotions and what have you. So you can see how difficult it is. Difficult. What is it? This is going to be a painful dialogue. There are too many who are unwilling to accept history. Yes, of course. So again, it's a long haul of a thing. But all I'm saying is that whether we have the dialogue now or conversation now or we don't, we who see the significance and the pricelessness of such conversation or of making sure that these themes are kept on the front burner. We may be few, but sometimes it is, as it is said, one is a majority. So the few that understand what is going on, if it is books that have to be written, if it is platforms, communication platforms, media platforms that we have to use, we have to make sure to use them. It's like talking about if they don't, who is going to do that? If no one is doing it, then as well forget about it. No, it cannot be that way. We, the few, have to keep hammering the case in. I am reminded of a pastor who often preached one sermon over and over. And someone said, Pastor, for several months now you have been preaching this one thing. Said, until they change, I am not going to change my thing. I am not going to change my sermon. And I think those little stories, however simplistic they may be, they hold power that we have to keep at something very positive, something very strong. And eventually, it may, like I said some time ago, it may not take ourselves, it may not take our children. One fine day, our children's children, something is going to break out. Whoever knew, let's talk about it. Whoever knew that institutionalized slavery will come to an end? Whoever knew that? But it had to take people working day and night and what have you. And then eventually people saw sense and began to dismantle institutionalized slavery. That's probably what it is. We who know better, or not just know better, but are able to articulate that, will bring along people who know better but don't want to say anything, and eventually it's going to rise.
I agree with Sam that it's going to be a painful dialogue. You know, it's like if you watch the Truth Commission report in South Africa, you know, they made a conscious decision, right, that unless there was egregious harm, that they were going to forgive, right? And some of the people, they ask you, what can you live with?
Mm.
That was the question. And a mother would say, you know what? I can live with the fact that this man is now going to jail, but I want to know where my son's body is. You know, carry me there so I can bury my son. You
Mm.
know, so it comes
Closure.
to, yeah, closure. So it comes to, Liberia is caught in this, like I call it, this conundrum of, do we go ahead or do we go back? And the closure has to come for us to move on, and it's painful. You know, like burying a loved one body. We have to bury that past, but like Sam says, before we bury it, the painful thing has to be acknowledged. You
Mm.
know, and then we say, Liberia, what can you live with now and still move on? We have to do that. You know, Prof, I every 25 years or 50 years, right? The Library of Congress in America, I said they vomit all these papers. And you and I and Dan and Dennis can attest. When I go through some of these papers, Prof, you you read and you don't think that these people were referring to human beings
Mm.
in the world. These animals, these savages, they
Yes.
call the little Liberian children their pets. You
Mm.
know, their pets,
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
talk about a dog.
Mm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you sit and you say, what am I reading?
Mm.
Did these people not know? Well, thank God there was no social media. The social media was the paper.
Mm.
And they wrote letters. The people are this, they people, but you know, also these people like the British, these colonizers would not have, like, this small country Britain would not have gone so much if they didn't have enablers. They got enablers too. So what they would do is they would turn a group against the other one, give them
Divide
tobacco,
and rule. Yeah.
give them, and give them gin, and turn them against this other group.
Yeah.
So that is what's happening. So when you read those papers, Prof, I don't think we can ever bring some of those papers, because when I read, I'm like, what am I reading?
Yeah.
What am I reading? So I agree with Sam, and like I said, we've invited Sam to come and talk about some of these things that he feels that are too painful that we need to discuss. But I guess for me, this rage that Romeo Dallaire talked about, he shake hands with the devil. This rage that he talks about, we don't want this rage to explode. And the way we can try to alleviate this pressure is, again, this discussion. So I hope that if there is to be a debate among the people vying for president in Liberia, or the vice presidents, or whatever, there needs to be on the table, what will you do to foster national unity? I tell people all the time, Ghanaians are unified. You go there and you try to do something, and they kind of, they're Ghanaians. You go to Zambia, it's the same thing. When how we shake hands in Liberia, the men shake hands. When Zambians are shaking hands, they chant that goes with that is one Zambia, one nation, one people. And it's like a refrain that they say, and we say, when you say it enough times, it becomes true, So I think that every one of us should think about, I think what we should do, Prof, and I think those on will agree with us. We can start doing this dialogue. We can start saying, what are some of the things that you think should be? Now, we don't mean minute things like, the man took, no. We don't want the man took my land, my uncle land, no. It should be an overarching, like, land ownership. It can be like education inequities, things like that, not minor things, but a macro way of looking at these injustices on both sides, and then compiling these things and say, maybe now, since we have this list, we can start discussing to bring about national unity. Because, like Romeo Dallaire says, seismic changes can take place in an instant. All you need is that build up, and when you look, you strike the match. But like Animal Farm, they said the revolution came and they were not prepared. Right? So we want to be prepared so that this revolution of rage does not come, that we're able to move Liberia forward, And it will start with this sense of belonging. Who is a Liberian? Why do we divide to conquer others and say, oh, you are not a Liberian? What does it mean to be a Liberian? What do you think a Liberian is? Who do you think a Liberian is? What are your list of who a Liberian? Who is a Liberian? Those are things that you need to sit down to and start compiling your list. And maybe next week, when we come, you can come back and say, these are the things that you must, these are the characteristics you must have to be a Liberian. And then we have this frank discussion. And who knows, people might want to join. And then little by little, it builds, And I think that, I think that that's what we need to do. We need to talk about it, We need to bring back that, what is Liberia to me? What does Liberia mean to me? And make people think. Yeah, I think so. Sam said you have already started a path towards the dialogue. Just need to determine who is missing from the Palava hut. And like Sam or Nangbe or Boyina, anybody who wants to discuss, we should discuss, Prof, what it means to be a Liberian. When you cross the ocean and move from Liberia, does that automatically disqualify you from being a Liberian? If you were a young boy in an indigenous society in Nimba or in Kepamas, and you were brought to Monrovia to stay with a family who told you not to speak your language, but you are a Grebo boy, are you not a Liberian because you cannot speak Grebo? Those are the things, taking into account the peculiarities of Liberia. Start making your list, Start by saying to yourself, I'm a Liberian. What does it mean when I say I'm a Liberian? What does it mean? List those features. And then you say, okay, if I say to somebody, you're a Liberian, what does it mean to be a Liberian? And then let us come back next week and discuss this, and start putting together this framework of what it means to be a Liberian going forward. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. I know there's another show coming. We always say thank you for joining us. It's not a history is not pretty. There's no history that said, oh, it started without a struggle.
Yeah.
But we have to move forward. We have to have this painful discussion, but we have to move forward. As a nation, we cannot be stuck. If we be stuck and artificial intelligence come and take over everything,
That's true.
so we have to have this discussion. So next week, bring your list. Tell other people to bring the list. Join us next week, 6:00, right here, so we can discuss again. So we already have so you guys know next week now we already have the discussion. Who is a Liberian? What does Liberian means to me? That's what we're going to discuss next week. Yeah, so we want to say thank you for joining us, Prof. And I, as always, we're here, Prof.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think we had a good discussion today.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I think we had a good discussion. So we want to say thank you to all of you who've joined us.
Yeah.
As we always say, share the show, talk to others, and tell them that they should come and bring their list and let us discuss. If you want to come on the show, we're not stopping you. You can definitely join us. And today, of all days, today is one of the days that this song means a lot. We are all Liberians. And if we take this as our theme song, that Liberia is the roof, we are the rooms, but Liberia is the roof, there's no place we can go. So thank you very much. Remember, we are all Liberians, and I know it's going to be hot. So keep warm, stay safe, and we'll see you here next week. Yeah, bye, Prof.
Bye.
Okay.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Country.